I would like to welcome Andrew Beagley, and Mansoor on the stage. Please come on. So when I met, this is my first time meeting Andrew in person, and it's a pleasure. Please have a seat. I got introduced to Andrew for this track, and my first interaction was like, wow, this is like, I was totally blown away with our conversation over Zoom, because he brings so much experience about regulatory compliance across the board. And today's topic, we are going to be talking about how cloud security risk governance is under the regulatory spotlight. So a brief introduction about Andrew. Andrew is the Chief Risk Officer at RiskOps.AI, and he's focused on helping organizations implement an AI-driven approach to cyber risk governance and third party. Prior to that, Andrew held global chief risk and compliance officer positions across different financial industries, healthcare and insurance, and you can see like how much regulatory aspect comes into the picture in those industries. And he's a former regulator at the FCA and SEC. Fun fact about Andrew is that he is an award-winning filmmaker as well, and brings to life complex risk, compliance, and ethics issue on the big screen. He lives in Brooklyn, so thank you, Andrew, for coming all the way to share your wisdom with so many of us.
Thank you,
really appreciate that. And Mansoor, he's the CEO of Veltris, a technology solutions company focusing on organizations focused on technology transformations. And prior to Veltris, Mansoor headed the growth of Wavelabs.AI from 100 to 500 plus employees. So with that, the floor is yours, Mansoor and Andrew. Let's take it off.
Thanks, Monica. Andrew, we have a tough act to follow. After so many great sessions and between lunch, it's always a difficult session to squeeze in. But the best introduction that can happen is in your own terms. I know you have an incredible background. Maybe for the benefit of the audience, if you can give us a perspective of your background and how that dovetails into the conversation that we're having today.
Thanks, Mansoor. It's great to be here, and thank you for the introduction, Monica. So I've been at RiskOps.AI for about 4 years, really since Ajay Sarkar founded the company. And what Ajay was setting out to do was to take traditional risk and compliance programs to the next level using AI. So kind of a traditional approach to risk management, which is what people like me have grown up with, which is like PowerPoint slides, Excel spreadsheets, and so on. Back in the day, you scored high marks with regulators, and auditors and committees and so on, if you could show that good faith effort. But what's happened is, with the rapidly changing regulatory environment and risk environment, that traditional approach is no longer good enough. So what we're doing at RiskOps.AI is helping organizations take whatever it is they're doing today with their risk programs and using AI to get them to the next level. And that with a particular focus around cyber risk governance and third-party threat exposure. That's what we do.
Wonderful. Just a quick dovetail into my background. Veltris stands for Velocity and Trust, the name of the company I lead. And the notion that we've taken is that technology is evolving at such a fast pace that it's challenging for organizations to strike a balance between business outcomes and technology. So we believe with our full stack experience, knowledge of the industry, we can help customers accelerate technology transformations and transitions. We built it from 0 to about 1,000 people in the last 5 years, raised money from private equity along the way. And during the many conversations that I have with CTOs, VP engineers, and CXOs, and many startups in the security space, the notion remains that security is often an afterthought, where it needs to be forefront. And security, governance, and compliance is even an afterthought, and it needs to be at the forefront. before we get into all kinds of difficulties. So from that perspective, Andrew, when you and I caught up, you mentioned about the new SEC regulation in December. I know the previous panel touched upon that a little bit, but maybe can you highlight some of the nuances that the audience here needs to keep in mind? Compliance in general, but cloud coming into play as well.
Absolutely. So the main reason for mentioning the SEC cybersecurity disclosure rules here is not that many organizations here will necessarily be directly impacted by that, but to me and to our organization, it's one of these like bellwether regulations. So every company should stand back and say, well, how would we fare if we had to disclose a cyber breach promptly? Would we quantify that? Could we actually identify it, and how would we disclose it? And then second, and it's the second piece of the regulation that we find really fascinating, and to be honest, organizations are not as focused on this. It's disclosing the fact that you have an effective cyber risk governance program in place. So to ask everybody here, if you had to spend 10 minutes drafting your elevator pitch on what your cyber risk governance arrangements would be, how well would you fare? And that goes to the heart of what organizations are doing now using AI, and that's what we believe can help companies get themselves onto the front foot with a cyber risk governance program that is not just words, but is meaningful as well. And there's different components that make up what could be it's described as an effective program.
And we'll get to the proverbial AI, Gen AI question towards the last 5 minutes, but before that, how are, in your experience, and it's been a recent regulation, how do you think companies are adopting? Are there processes in place? Are there technologies in place? Are there point solutions, full solutions? How are companies embracing this regulation?
I think it's still very early days, but what it's causing all companies to stand back and say, how would we define cyber risk governance? So, for example, do you have an AI-driven approach to quantifying cyber risk? Have you adopted, say, continuous threat exposure management, the continuous approach to cyber, quantification of risk and prioritization of risk? Do you have AI-driven maturity models in place that show you where you're at on your journey? What we're seeing at RiskOps.AI is companies are thinking about that, but there's still a long way to go in terms of really using AI to its full, whether that's the data ingestion process, whether it's configuring a specific risk model for your organization to help you in this regard, and then actually generating visual analytics that improve decision making and generate kind of decision supremacy, if you like. So still a long way to go, but again, not just focusing on companies that are specifically required to disclose under SEC rules, but more generally, organizations are in the thick of things, and in our experience, we're seeing a wide variety of different rates of progress. A long way to go, I would say.
And underline that thesis, we talked about how there are various point solutions that meet a specific need or specific requirement, and the previous panels also talked about it. In the brief time that this has been released, how are those point solutions coming together? Can AI play a role in bringing them together and stitch them together to solve this regulation, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's interesting that just stepping back, the timing of the disclosure rules, of course, is all about the SEC's concern for investor protection, and AI is absolutely available to help organizations take whatever it is they're doing today and to take that to the next level. And three practical examples that what any organization can really do is use AI, as we were talking we heard in the previous session, to normalize data, so to be able to take data from multiple different sources, identify common elements, and then aggregate that. So you have a level playing field, you're aggregating apples with apples with apples. You can then start to generate meaningful analytics around cyber risk quantification using AI. Once you've done that, you can then start to create modeling around risk prioritization and risk scenario planning. So those three AI-driven steps put you in a position where you can then start to move to what we would describe as decision supremacy. In other words, you're on the front foot. You're taking whatever traditional approach you've had to managing cyber risk, and you're making it much more intuitive, much more predictive, and importantly, much more kind of risk-focused for that decision-making.
Thank you for that. And there is a notion that when you move some of your, or majority of your workloads to the cloud providers are making sure that they are compliant to all these regulations. Does that leave room for you to take a back seat, or?
It's a great question, and the financial services industry for many years has lived by the notion you can delegate the activity, but you retain the responsibility, of course. And exactly the same thing, we would argue, applies to any organization that's using a cloud service provider. You have the service level agreement in place and standards and so on, but at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, ultimately your clients are coming after you. They're not coming after the cloud service provider. So in that regard, what we've been talking about here, with some of these AI techniques, they lend themselves very well to at least at a minimum demonstrate your oversight that you're performing of your cloud service providers. And from the other way around, it's good. A cloud service provider is not just receiving another questionnaire to fill in, whatever. They're actually they're being asked to provide data, and that you can then start to produce meaningful AI-driven analytics. That you can go to your clients, you can go to your boards, and say, yeah, we're comfortable with this decision to use this third party. So what AI is doing here is bringing to life these principles of using a third party, but which traditionally, I have to say, I'm not referring here to cloud service providers, more generally using third party. It has been a paper chase. It has been a check the box. It's been very difficult to actually bring real meaning to use of third parties, to be able to stack rank your third parties, to be able to quantify risk amongst those. And again, these AI techniques put you onto the front foot to be able to make smarter decisions about who you're delegating your work to.
Thank you so much. And I'll pose one last question and open it up for questions to the audience. Is this limited to the large enterprises, or every organization has to have a posture that they have to be ready with?
Look, at the end of the day, it's about the culture of the organization, and it's about the desire to do the right thing. Now, for a small organization, one could argue it's actually more straightforward. If you're just starting out, if you're in your early days, and you have fewer systems and applications, yes, start from as early as you can with these techniques. One of the challenges that large organizations have that we speak to is they found themselves in a situation where you've got hundreds and thousands of different systems and applications across products and services and geographies and so on. And this whole notion of being able to consolidate that data, to be able to rationalize that, and again, AI can help with that as well across large organizations to create kind of this single source of truth. But no, there's no kind of hard and fast rule here that these techniques should just apply to companies over a certain size. They absolutely can apply to everyone, but in different ways. And by having the ability to create a customized risk model that's specific to the organization, that reflects the organization's DNA, you can then start to quantify risk in a meaningful way for that particular organization, whether it's large or small. And then you're on the front foot in terms of using AI to make smarter risk mitigation decisions and coming up with risk scenario plans. So it's for everybody.
Yeah, we'll open it up to audience for questions, but any advice for budding entrepreneurs in this space? I know Silicon Valley is home to a lot of startup ideas, but any advice to entrepreneurs in the compliance and regulation with the AI angle thrown in there?
So, I think a couple of universal principles. If you approach your business from a risk perspective, if you understand the risks that you're taking, it goes without saying that you're going to be more successful in the longer run. So the more you can integrate a culture of risk management into the operations, into the enterprise, that's great. That then makes it much easier to use AI techniques from an early stage, work out what's best for you, create a customized model that's best for you. So start early, I would say. This is here for everyone to adopt. We're not going to get it right overnight, crawl, walk, run, but the more you can dovetail risk management into the organization to understand the organization's business risks and the potential impact on their goals and objectives, the more you can do that as a young company, the better you will be served in the long run. And AI is absolutely here now to help you with that.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. I know we are really short on time here, but love to field some questions.
Yeah, I'm from healthcare industry, and generally, we are very guarded to begin with. So I want to hear your comments from your background as to how do you see AI, we can benefit from AI, but at the same time maintain that security and privacy that we have to maintain.
Absolutely. So the question is specific to the healthcare industry. So I'll give you two quick responses to that. First, across healthcare, we've seen a massive consolidation of hospital systems and networks and providers and so on and so forth. Now, typically, this is a generalization, but typically you would see that at the banner level, the hospital name level, the health provider level. Underneath that, what we see typically is a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of consolidating systems, applications, refining cultures of the legacy organizations and so on. And there, AI lends itself very well to be able to connect all of those different legacy pieces and to create what could be described as a single source of truth. So that's one point. And then specific on data privacy, and this goes back to a couple of the earlier discussions, building trust with data is going to be a differentiator. There's no question about it. And organizations should view this in a positive and a proactive way. They shouldn't be shy of data protection, but this is something that organizations will be required to say to investors, to the media, to regulators and so on, that these are the robust controls that we have in place. And again, I think AI would be useful for that too, whether it's HIPAA or any other state regulations.
And way back here, I don't know if you can hear me. But
yeah.
An extension to the privacy that the previous question touched upon. This morning, Jensen Wong also spoke about the wealth of a country is the data of its citizens. It's no longer what's under the earth, but it's actually the data of its citizens and the country. So given that sensitivity, and given all the complexity of the technology and data going all across the world, hopping between countries, is there a way that AI can help to see what all is happening and how do you limit the risk? And do you see in the future that countries will be a lot more protective of their data that, I don't want this to go out of my borders. So how do you foresee all this playing out?
It's a great question. So today, just north of 80% of countries around the world have some form of data privacy regulation in place, right? So it's a significant number. What's interesting, if you look across all of those different sets of regulations, there is a high degree of overlap with them. And this is an area, it's a bit like anti-money laundering in a way. It's an area where countries have typically borrowed from one another. What that enables you to do then is to take an aggregated view of all of the countries that you're operating in, or where you have customers in, whatever your metrics are, is to identify the commonality of those regulations, the common controls that are in place, and then using AI, exactly the same techniques, to start to quantify the risk associated with those different control elements from the underlying sets of regulations. And again, then start to prioritize where you need to invest your time and effort, first of all, to understand the risk in its totality around data privacy, but then start to make more prioritized and strategic decisions about where you should be operating, where your weaknesses are from a data privacy perspective. So rather than a traditional bottom-up approach country by country, what you can do with AI, building these customizable risk models, is to start to create this top-down, global, holistic approach to your risk profile, which makes it, which gets you onto the front foot in terms of where you would like to be.
Thank you so much. I think with that, wrap it up. Well, I'll wrap it up. Andrew and I are available outside if you want any further questions. But thank you so much for coming here and participating today. Thank you.